Please don't hit us, we're already hurt. The two little girls, no older than 7, huddled together in the snow, their tiny bodies shaking as they clung to each other, whispering through chattering teeth. Their wide eyes trembled with fear as they looked up at the tall silhouette looming above them. For a heartbeat, the man said nothing, stunned by the sight before him. The girls were alone, barefoot, in worn sandals on Christmas Eve. Who could abandon 2 children like this, alone in the biting cold? And why tonight, of all nights? Before we dive into the story, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. Christmas was supposed to be the season of joy and laughter, but for 36-year-old Charles, it had become a harsh reminder of how life had pushed him to the edge. 2 jobs, endless bills, and the crushing weight of exhaustion bore down on him every day. The only reason he kept going was his little son Noah, his light in the darkness. That night, a raw wind whipped through the streets as Charles pulled his thin coat tighter, leaving the diner after yet another extra shift. He hurried toward the bus stop, head down, when something unusual caught his eye near the alley. At first it looked like a pile of discarded clothes, but then came a weak whimper. His breath froze. He stepped closer. 2 little girls, no older than 7, were huddled together against the cold wall. Their lips were blue, their small bodies trembling, their shoes worn thin. Charles's heart hammered against his ribs as he stared at the 2 tiny figures pressed against the brick wall. The wind howled through the alley, carrying the chill of the snow that had just begun to fall. The girls' eyes were wide with terror, reflecting the faint light of the street lamp like trapped animals. "Hey," he whispered slowly, bending down so as not to scare them further. "Are you okay?" The girls flinched, pulling their arms closer together. Their arms were wrapped around each other in a protective embrace that made Charles's throat tighten. "Please don't hurt us." "We'll do anything you want," they whispered through chattering teeth, their voices trembling with fear. Charles's heart sank. He could see the terror in their eyes, and he knew he had to do something to assure them that they were safe. "Hurt you?" he said calmly. "No, never. I'm not here to hurt you. Let me keep you warm tonight." He continued, his voice remaining gentle. "My name is Charles. I just want to help." One girl whispered something he couldn't quite catch. The other buried her face in her sister's shoulder, her small body shaking violently. Charles could see their breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. Their clothes were thin, completely inadequate for this weather, and their shoes had holes that let the cold seep into their tiny feet. The sight hit him hard. He thought of his own son Noah, safe and warm in their small apartment just a few blocks away. The thought of his son in this situation made his stomach twist. Without a second thought, Charles took off his coat and placed it over their small shoulders. The girls stiffened at first, but then one of them leaned into the warmth, her eyes closing for a moment as if savoring the feeling of safety. "Come on," he gently urged, extending his hand. "Let me take you somewhere warm. My apartment isn't far. You will be safe there." The twins looked at each other, seeming to have a silent conversation. After a long moment, they gave a small nod. Their tiny fingers slipped into his hand, trembling but trusting. Charles had no idea that the choice he had just made would change everything. As they walked through the deserted streets, Charles's mind was reeling. What was he doing? He barely had enough to feed himself, and Noah, let alone 2 more children. But every time he glanced down at their small faces, pale and etched with exhaustion, he knew he couldn't have left them there. A memory flashed into his mind as they climbed the stairs to his apartment another Christmas Eve 30 years ago. 2 boys, just as afraid, just as alone, standing in a similar hallway. But that time, he and his twin brother James were separated and sent to different foster families after their parents died in a car accident. Charles shook the memory away. Not tonight. Tonight was about these girls. Noah was waiting by the window when they arrived, his face brightening, as it always did when he saw his father return. But Noah's expression quickly shifted to curiosity as he noticed the 2 shivering girls beside Charles. "Dad." Noah's voice was husky, filled with innocent surprise. "Who are they?" "These are—" He looked down at the girls, realizing he didn't even know their names. "These are our guests for tonight. They needed a warm place to stay." Noah, only 8 but intelligent beyond his years, sensed their plight and simply nodded, stepping aside to let them in. The warmth of the apartment seemed to revive the girls a little, though they still clung tightly to one another. Charles knelt in front of them, his voice gentle, as he helped them remove their wet shoes. "You're safe here," he said softly. "No one is going to hurt you. Let me get you something warm to eat." He walked to the small kitchen and reheated the pot of soup he had made earlier. A simple vegetable soup, with whatever he could afford. Soup warmed, he glanced at the girls. They sat on the edge of his worn couch, their eyes nervously darting around the modest apartment. Charles placed 2 steaming bowls on the small table and motioned for them to come closer. They hesitated, looking at each other again, with that silent communication that only twins seem to possess. Finally, they approached the table and took tiny sips. The way they ate after the first taste was heartbreaking. They quickly devoured the soup desperately, as if they hadn't had a decent meal in days, which Charles realized with growing horror they probably hadn't. When the bowls were empty, Charles sat opposite them, his voice gentle but curious. "And can you tell me your names?" The older of the 2, or at least the one who seemed to take the lead, spoke first. Her voice was fragile but clear. "Maya," she said, pointing to herself. And she gestured to her sister. "And this is Anna." "Maya and Anna," Charles repeated with a warm smile. "Beautiful names. I'm Charles, and this is my son, Noah." The girls didn't return the smile. Their eyes continued to dart around the room, as if expecting someone to burst through the door at any moment. "Maya," Charles said carefully, "can you tell me how you ended up out there? Where are your parents?" Maya's face instantly darkened. She looked at Anna, who began to tremble again. "We ran away," Mia whispered, her voice so faint Charles could barely hear it. "From where, sweetie?" "From Sandra. She's not our real mother. She's our stepmother." Charles felt a cold shiver that had nothing to do with the weather outside. "Why did you run away?" Maya's bottom lip trembled. "Because she makes us go out and beg for money from people, and if we don't bring back enough, she hurts us." The words hit Charles like a sledgehammer. He glanced at Noah, who was listening with wide, horrified eyes. "Tonight we tried to go back." Anna spoke up for the first time, her voice even smaller than her sister's. "But she said we couldn't come in because we didn't have any money. She said we could freeze too. She didn't care." Charles felt something burning in his chest, a pure and intense fury that made him take a deep breath to keep his voice steady. "Well, you won't be freezing. Not tonight, not ever, if I have anything to say about it." As the girls settled onto the couch with the blanket Charles had pulled from his own bedroom, his mind wandered back to that Christmas Eve 30 years ago. He and James were 8 the same age as Noah now. The foster placements were arranged on opposite sides of the city, and despite promises that they could see each other, the visits became fewer and further between. James ended up in a home where the foster father cared more about the monthly stipend than the children. Charles had been luckier. His placement had been with a kind but overwhelmed single woman who did her best with limited resources. They lost touch completely as they became teenagers. Charles had searched for his brother for years, making calls, checking records, anything he could think of. When he finally found information about James, it was too late. His twin brother had died at 23 from an overdose alone in a cheap hotel room. The guilt had haunted Charles for years. If only they hadn't been separated. If only he had found him sooner. If only he had tried harder. Looking at Maya and Anna now curled up together even in sleep, he made a silent vow. No matter what it took, no matter how hard it was, these girls would not be separated, and they would never go back to the hell they came from. Not on his watch. Charles woke up the next morning to the sound of soft voices in the living room. He found Noah sitting on the floor with Maya and Anna, showing them his small collection of toys, a couple of action figures, some building blocks, and the toy car Charles had wrapped for him. "This was supposed to be my Christmas present," Noah said, holding up the unopened car. "But I think you should have it instead. You probably haven't gotten any presents in a long time." Maya stared at the toy car, her eyes welling up with tears. "We can't take your present." "It's okay," Noah said with the simple generosity only children possess. "My dad will get me another one someday. Besides, it's more fun to have someone to play with." Charles felt his throat tighten as he watched Anna cautiously reach out and touch the car. When was the last time these girls had been given a gift? When was the last time someone was kind to them without expecting something in return? That's when Maya started to cry. Not the whimpering cries of fear from the night before, but deep, grateful sobs that seemed to release months of pent-up fear and pain. Charles moved to the couch and pulled her close, and to his surprise, she didn't resist. Anna quickly came to them, and for the first time since he found them, both girls genuinely relaxed. "We want to stay here," Maya whispered into his shoulder. "Please don't make us go back." "I won't," Charles promised, even though he didn't know how he would keep it. "I won't let anyone hurt you again." If you've ever asked yourself what you would do when faced with an impossible choice, this story will show you that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the greatest rewards. Stay tuned to see how Charles's decision changed not just his life, but the lives of two little girls who had given up hope. 3 days later, Charles's small world exploded. He was preparing breakfast when a loud, forceful knock echoed through the apartment. The girls instantly stiffened. Their faces went white with terror. "She found us," Anna whispered, grasping Maya's hand. Charles cautiously walked to the door. "Who is it?" "Open this door right now, or I'm calling the police." A woman's voice yelled from the other side. "I know you have my girls in there." Charles glanced back at Maya and Anna, who were now shaking violently. Noah had moved closer to them, his young face set with determination. "Stay here," Charles murmured to them and then opened the door. The woman standing in the hallway was not what he expected. Sandra was thinner than he had imagined. She was gaunt with pale skin and filled with the telltale signs of drug use. Her eyes were wild, darting, and full of desperate fury. "Where are they?" she demanded, trying to push past him into the apartment. Charles blocked her way. "I think you need to calm down." "Don't you tell me to calm down. You kidnapped my kids. Give them back now, or I swear I'll have you arrested." "Those girls were freezing to death on the street," Charles stated firmly. "They said you wouldn't let them in," Sandra laughed. Bitter and harsh. "They're lying. Kids always lie. Besides, what I do with my kids is none of your business." "It is my business when I find them nearly frozen to death," Charles shot back. "Look at this dump," Sandra sneered, looking him up and down with contempt. "You can barely afford this heap of trash. How do you think you can take care of 2 more kids when you're already failing with your own?" The words stung because they held a kernel of truth. Charles was struggling financially, but looking back at the girls peeking around the corner with terror in their eyes, he knew money wasn't everything. "These girls are staying here," he stated softly. "At least until we figure out what's best for them." "What's best for them is coming home with their mother," Sandra spat. "And if you don't hand them over now, I'll make your life a living hell." Maya and Anna aren't going anywhere with you," Charles said, his voice gaining strength. "Not until Child Services can investigate their living situation." Sandra's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You don't know who you're messing with. I'll be back, and next time I'm bringing the police. We'll see how tough you are then." As she turned and stormed down the hallway, leaving Charles standing in the doorway with his heart pounding. That night, after the girls were finally asleep, Charles sat at his small kitchen table, his head in his hands. The reality of his situation was grim. Sandra was right about one thing. He could barely afford to take care of Noah, let alone 2 more children. But every time he thought about sending Maya and Anna away, he remembered James. He recalled the last conversation with his twin 5 years after they had been separated. James had called him drunk and crying, telling him about the foster home, where the older kids bullied him relentlessly, and the foster father ignored it all. He had pleaded with Charles to come get him, but Charles was only 13, powerless to help. "I wish we never got separated," James had sobbed over the phone. "I wish we could be together." That was the last time they spoke. 6 years later, Charles got the call about the overdose. Now looking at Maya and Anna sleeping peacefully on the couch, Charles knew he couldn't let history repeat itself. These girls had lost so much. He wouldn't let them lose each other too. But how could he fight someone like Sandra? How could he afford a lawyer? How could he prove he could provide a better home when he was so stretched thin? The answer came to him suddenly, and he reached for the phone with a trembling hand. Marcus, his old college roommate, who had gone on to become a successful lawyer while Charles had struggled to find steady work. They hadn't spoken in over a year, but maybe. Marcus's voice was surprised but warm when he answered. "Charles. Wow, it's been a long time. How are you?" "I need help, Marcus," Charles said without preamble. "I'm in a situation I don't know how to handle, and I need a lawyer." He explained everything, finding the girls, Sandra's threats, his determination to keep the twins together and safe. When he finished, silence hung on the other end of the line. "Charles." Marcus finally said, "What you're trying to do, it's not going to be easy. Custody cases are expensive, and the system tends to favor blood relatives, even when the family isn't ideal." "I know," Charles said, "but I can't let them be separated. And I can't let them go back to the woman who turned their lives into a nightmare. I feel obligated to protect them." "Why?" Marcus asked. "Why is this so important to you?" Charles told him about James, about the foster homes, the separation, the guilt that had haunted him for years. When he finished, Marcus was silent for a long moment. "I'll help you," he finally said. "But I have to be honest. Your financial situation is going to be an issue. Sandra's lawyer will argue that you can't adequately provide for 2 more children." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork interviews with social workers and tense phone calls from Sandra's lawyer. Charles took on extra shifts at both his jobs, working 18-hour days to save money for legal fees. He was exhausted, running on coffee and determination. But every time he came home to find Maya and Anna a little more comfortable, more willing to smile, he knew he was doing the right thing. The girls slowly opened up, sharing fragments of their life. The story made Charles's blood boil. Sandra had exploited them for begging, and sometimes worse, taking them into stores to distract staff while she shoplifted. When they didn't bring enough money back or got caught, the punishments were severe. "She locked us in the closet once for a whole day," Maya had whispered one evening as Charles tucked them in, because Anna couldn't stop crying when the man at the store yelled at her. "That will never happen again," Charles promised, trying to keep his voice steady. "You're safe now." But were they? Every night, Charles lay awake, worrying about the upcoming custody hearing. Marcus had been honest about their chances. Sandra had biology on her side, and Charles's financial situation made him look unstable in the eyes of the court. "We need to prove you can provide a better environment," Marcus had explained in one of their meetings. Better doesn't always mean richer, but it has to mean stable. And that's when Marcus surprised him with an unexpected offer. "There's a position open at my firm, not a lawyer job. It's more of a paralegal and office manager combination, but it pays well, has benefits and regular hours. The thing is, they need someone to start immediately, and the custody hearing is next week." Charles stared at him. "You're offering me a job." "I'm offering you a chance," Marcus corrected. "You have to prove yourself. But Charles, you're one of the smartest people I know. You just never got the right opportunities." It felt like a miracle, but Charles couldn't shake the feeling that it was too convenient, too perfect. Why now? Why me? Marcus smiled. Because sometimes the universe has a way of putting the right people in the right place at the right time, and because I've seen what you are willing to sacrifice for those girls. Anyone who is willing to fight that hard for children who aren't even their own is exactly the kind of person I want working with me. The custody hearing was scheduled for a cold Tuesday morning in January. Charles had barely slept the night before, reviewing his testimony with Marcus one last time, while Maya and Anna watched cartoons with Noah. Remember, Marcus had said, be honest about your struggles, but emphasize what you can provide. Stability loved the commitment to keep them together. The judge needs to see that you understand the gravity of what you are taking on. At the courthouse, Charles felt painfully underdressed in his only nice suit, a cheap one he had bought years ago for a job interview. Sandra was there with her lawyer, a sharply dressed man who looked like he charged more per hour than Charles made in a week. Maya and Anna sat with a social worker in the hallway, looking small and afraid in identical donated clothes. Charles had wanted to spare them from testifying, but the judge had insisted on hearing from them. All rise, the bailiff announced, and Charles felt his stomach drop as the judge entered the courtroom. Judge Patricia Hernandez was a severe-looking woman in her late 50s with deep, dark eyes. She glanced over the case files with a frown that didn't bode well for anyone. Sandra's lawyer went first, painting a picture of a mother who had made mistakes but was ready to reform. He glossed over the drug use, framed the neglect as financial hardship, and portrayed Charles as an unstable man who was overstepping his bounds. Your Honor, the lawyer said smoothly. While Mr. Hunter's intentions may be good, he simply does not possess the resources to care for 2 additional children. My client, despite past difficulties, is the biological guardian and has the right to raise her own stepchildren as she sees fit. When it was Marcus's turn, he stood and adjusted his tie. Your Honor, this case is not about biological rights or finances. It is about what is truly in the best interest of Maya and Anna. Mr. Hunter found these children freezing to death on Christmas Eve, abandoned by the very person who claims to want them back. In the weeks since he had provided them with stability, safety, and something they have never had before, the assurance that they will not be separated. Marcus called Charles to the stand first. Under oath, Charles told his story, finding the girls, learning about their situation, and his determination to keep them together. Mr. Hunter, the judge asked, you work 2 jobs and care for your son. How do you plan to adequately provide for 2 more children? Charles took a deep breath. Your Honor, I was recently offered a full-time position with better pay and benefits. But even before that, these girls were fed, they slept in warm beds, and they went to school every day. It's true that money is tight, but they lacked nothing. They need. And if I grant you custody, what is your long-term plan? Adoption, Charles said without hesitation. I want to adopt both girls, so they never have to worry about being separated again. The judge made a note and called Mia to the stand next. Mia looked tiny in the witness chair, her legs dangling, as she answered the judge's gentle questions. Maya, can you tell me about life with Sandra? Mia's voice was almost inaudible. She was always angry, and when she was on her bad medicine, she'd forget to buy food, or she would hurt us if we did something wrong. And what about living with Mr. Hunter? For the first time, Maya smiled. He makes us breakfast every morning, and Noah shares his toys with us. And Charles promised we could stay together forever. When Anna testified, she was even quieter than her sister, but her words carried just as much weight. I don't want to go back. I want to stay with Charles and Noah. They make us feel safe. Sandra was the last to take the stand, and her testimony was a disaster. She was clearly agitated, possibly under the influence, and her answers were inconsistent and defensive. Those girls belong with me. I know I made some mistakes, but I can do better. I've been clean for 3 weeks now. 3 weeks? The judge asked with a raised eyebrow. Well, mostly clean. Look, nobody is perfect, okay? But they are my responsibility. When Sandra's lawyer asked about her future plans, her answer made Charles's heart sink. "I'm looking for a bigger place," she said. "And if I need to separate them temporarily to get things sorted out, that's what I'll do. Kids are resilient." A silence fell over the courtroom. Charles saw Maya and Anna exchange a terrified glance from where they sat with the social worker. Judge Hernandez ordered a recess to review the case. Charles found himself pacing the hallway, unable to sit still. "What do you think?" he asked Marcus. "Better than expected," Marcus said carefully. Sandra didn't help her case, and the girl's testimony was powerful. But the judge is unpredictable in custody cases. When the court reconvened, Judge Hernandez looked grim as she prepared to deliver her verdict. "This is a complex case involving children who have endured significant trauma. The court must balance the rights of the biological guardian against the best interests of the children." Charles felt his heart hammering in his chest. "Miss Sandra Martinez, while you are the legal guardian of these children, your testimony and history raise serious concerns about your ability to provide a stable, safe environment. Your declared willingness to separate the children even temporarily is especially troubling." Sandra's face flushed. "You can't do this. They are my kids." "Mr. Hunter," the judge continued, "while your financial situation is not ideal, you have demonstrated a commitment to the children's welfare that goes above and beyond what is normally expected. Your promise to keep them together weighed heavily on this decision." Charles held his breath. "Therefore, the court grants temporary custody of Maya and Anna Martinez to Charles Hunter with a path towards full adoption pending the completion of necessary procedures and a 6-month review period." The gavel came down and Charles felt his knees almost buckle with relief. Sandra leaped out of her seat. "This is ridiculous! You're giving my children to some stranger who can barely pay his bills. I'll appeal. I'll fight." "That is enough, Ms. Martinez," the judge said sternly. "You are permitted to appeal, but I suggest you focus your energy on resolving the issues that led to this decision in the first place." As Sandra stormed out of the courtroom, still yelling, Charles turned to see Maya and Anna running toward him. He caught them. Both clung to him so tightly that he lifted them up. "Can we stay together?" Maya asked, tears streaming down her face. "Forever." Charles promised, his voice thick with emotion. "We are a family now. What happens when someone doesn't give up on what is right?" Even when everything seems impossible, Charles's story shows us that sometimes the biggest victories come from the most unexpected circumstances. A year later, Charles stood in the kitchen of their new apartment, a real 2-bedroom place with actual space for the kids to play. The job Marcus offered had turned into a career he never could have imagined, using his education in ways that finally felt meaningful. Maya and Anna were at the kitchen table doing homework while Noah helped them with the math problems. The adoption had been finalized 3 months earlier, and both girls now bore the surname Hunter. "Dad," Maya called, and Charles still felt a jolt of warmth every time she said it. "Can we make cookies for the school bake sale?" "Of course," he said, wiping his hands on a dishcloth. "But Noah gets to help too." "Obviously," Anna said, rolling her eyes with the perfect attitude of an 8-year-old. "He's the best decorator." Charles watched the 3 children and marveled at this sense of normalcy. There were still challenges, of course. Maya had nightmares sometimes, and Anna was still working with a therapist to process her trauma, but they were healing, thriving, becoming the children they were meant to be. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. When he opened it, Marcus was standing there with a bottle of champagne and a wide grin. "What's the celebration?" Charles asked. "The Peterson case just settled," Marcus said. "The one you helped investigate. We won big," which meant he handed Charles an envelope. "Bonus time." Charles opened the envelope and stared at the check inside. The amount was more than he had made in 6 months at his old jobs combined. "Marcus, this is too much." "It's not enough, actually," Marcus said. "Seriously. Charles, you have become invaluable to the firm. Your attention to detail, your research skills, your ability to connect with clients going through the worst moments of their lives. We've never had anyone like you. As if summoned by the praise, Maya appeared at Charles's elbow. Uncle Marcus, she said, giving him a hug. Marcus had become an integral part of their lives, and the kids had adopted him as family. Hey, kiddo. How is school? Great! I got an A on my English paper about heroes, and I wrote about Dad. Charles felt a lump in his throat. You wrote about me. About how you saved us, Anna said, stepping into the group with Noah behind her. You didn't give up even when it was hard. That evening, after Marcus had left and the kids were in bed, Charles found himself standing at the window, looking out at the Christmas lights decorating the neighborhood. It was exactly 1 year since that night in the alley, the night that changed everything. He thought about the man he had been, then exhausted, barely getting by, convinced he was failing at everything important. He had been so focused on what he didn't have that he almost missed what he could give. Maya appeared beside him in her pajamas, leaning into his arm. Dad, are you sad? No, sweetheart, just thinking. Charles smiled, putting his arm around her, about how sometimes the best things in life come when you're not looking for them. Like us. Exactly like you. Anna and Noah came to the window and stood together, watching the snow fall lightly outside. Dad, Noah said thoughtfully, do you think there are other kids out there who need help just like Maya and Anna did? Charles looked down at his son, surprised by his compassion. Probably. Maybe we can help them too. He exchanged a look with Maya and Anna, both of whom nodded enthusiastically. Maybe we can, he agreed. But for now, let's focus on taking care of our family. Oh, our family, Maya repeated, as if testing the sound of the word. I like the sound of that. As Charles tucked the girls into their beds, real beds in their own room, with stuffed animals and books and all the things children should have, he reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The road hadn't been easy. There had been court hearings and social worker visits, financial strain, and sleepless nights filled with worry. There were moments when he wondered if he was doing the right thing, if he was good enough for children who had been through so much. But Charles had learned that love wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up day after day and refusing to give up when things got hard. It was about choosing to see possibility instead of problems and hope instead of obstacles. Good night, Dad, Anna whispered as he kissed her forehead. Good night, my sweethearts. Dream big. As he turned off the light and closed the door, Charles thought about all the children still waiting out there for someone to see them, to choose them, to fight for them. The world was full of Maya's and Anna's children who just needed someone to believe they were worth saving. Maybe Noah was right. Maybe they could help more children down the line. But for now, Charles was content to have given his 3 children, including his own son, a priceless thing. The understanding that family wasn't just about blood. It was about the people who choose to love you, to protect you, and to never let you go. In the end, Charles learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give is the one you never intended to give, and sometimes in saving others, you discover that you saved yourself too. Christmas was no longer a harsh reminder of how life had pushed him to the edge. Now it was a celebration of how far love could carry him. If this story has touched your heart, remember that Maya's and Anna's are everywhere, waiting for someone to see their worth. Sometimes the most important choice we make isn't the easiest one, but it is always the one that guides us to the person we are meant to be. Thank you for joining us for this journey. If you believe in the power of love to change lives, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Soul Lift Stories for more stories that remind us of what truly matters in life. Stories like Charles's prove that heroes walk among us every day.